Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael West. I'm a founder and principal consultant with Natural Systems Process Improvement. For the past 16 years, my company and I have been helping organizations in all sectors of the economy develop QMSs and advanced process systems to meet the requirements of ISO, AS9100, and the CMMI. I'm a CMMI-Certified Lead Appraiser and an AS9100 Internal Auditor. What I'm going to share with you today is lessons I've learned over the last 15 years. Now, the caveat I have to give to this presentation is this is highly compressed and highly condensed into a 45-minute presentation. Normally, when I deliver this information at conferences, it's usually a half-day or even a full-day tutorial. So if after today, if you need more information, my contact information will be at the end of the slides, and I welcome your contact, and we'll have question and answer period at the end also. So the question is, and it's not really a trick question, the question is, what does ISO 9001 or AS9100 or TL 9000 or other ISO-based standards, what do they have to say about the development and maintenance of a QMS? And the answer is really very little. These standards basically say that you need to have a QMS and that QMS needs to enable compliance with the standards, but they don't really give you a lot of help or a lot of guidance in how to design and build a QMS. So what normally happens in your organizations, and I know that all of you have seen this happen, is people go off and write a big pile of documents that when you read them, they're organized and structured, and they sound very, very much like the requirements or the clauses in the standards. And in some cases, they might represent your organization's actual processes, the processes that are performed, but in a lot of cases, they don't. And so you spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and many years trying to get people to perform a process that's really not very natural to the way they work. So in this organization, in this presentation rather, I'm going to point you to areas of the capability maturity model integration that provide practices that are proven practices for the establishment of a persistent organization level process definition, deployment, and management focus. And I'm going to share with you the lessons that I've learned in using those practices over the past 16 years to help clients build effective QMSs. There are 7 rules. These are Michael's rules for designing and developing a process system. And I'm going to get a little bit more into what I mean about designing your process system or designing your QMS, your quality management system, a little bit later in the presentation. But let's just go through these rules right now. All performance improvement comes from the performed process, not the defined process. It doesn't matter what you have documented in your QMS. Business performance, process performance results only from what people are actually doing, what the performed process is. So if you think about that, then you realize that what you need to do is you need to have synchronicity. You need to have alignment between your QMS and what people are actually performing, either in engineering or in production. Rule 2, know what the problem is you're solving before you begin developing or improving your processes. A lot of times we think we can fix a problem or solve a problem with changing a procedure or changing a process, when in reality, the root cause of the problem is something entirely different than process. And I've got an example of that. The process is the product, and this is a paradigm shift. This is a totally different way of looking at your QMS and thinking about your QMS. And I've got a slide later in the presentation that illustrates that concept. Rule 4, design and build processes for the users. I see a lot of organizations develop their QMS to, please an auditor or to please a CMMI lead appraiser. That's not what you should build your process to do. You should build your processes to meet the needs of the people performing those processes. Rule 5, compliance with standards or with models is not necessarily the same as quality or improvement. If you think about the word compliance to a standard, a standard should be viewed sort of as the low bar for your processes. Your processes should exceed the standard to get greater business performance. Rule 6, plan and manage process development as a project. And Rule 7, process information and data exists in one and only one place. So I'm going to go, now I'm going to illustrate what I mean by these 7 rules and how I came up with them. I'm going to start with a quote from Einstein. And Einstein said, if I had an hour to save the world, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute finding solutions. And so by this, it means when we think about solving a problem, we should really take the time to understand what the root cause of the problem is and not just address symptoms of the problem. And we do that a lot. We do that by, changing the words in this procedure or changing the workflow in that process. And then we discover that it might have resolved a symptom, but then the problem or manifestations of the problem keep reoccurring. And how do we do that? So how do we know what problem we're trying to solve? In any modern organization, in all of your organizations that you belong to, those of you in this webinar, it is your organization, if you think about it as a system of systems, and it has 3 subsystems in your organization. One is the people, and that's often called the social system, and that's comprised of people, their skill sets, but also the cultural norms and the cultural values, the way people talk to each other, the way they communicate with each other. That is a system. You also have your technology. So this is your infrastructure. This is your platform, your databases, your your communication and presentation systems, your building. All of that is your technology subsystem. And then there are your process systems. And these 3 subsystems that make up the system called your organization or your company, we need to look at this holistically, and I'm gonna show you why. Because we need to know where we need to improve when we see a problem or we need to achieve a business performance goal. And I'm going to illustrate that idea by doing showing you a very simple example of a root cause analysis. And I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but again, I believe that the slides are made available to you for you looking at later. In this example, I used a root cause analysis technique called 5 whys, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the 5 whys. And the problem statement at the top is the second operator verification was missed at step 70, and that resulted in a corrective action report. And this is a very typical 5 whys because it basically, you go down asking questions why, until you get to what you believe to be the root cause of the problem. So this one said SAP permits inspection steps to move forward even though they are not signed off. Why? There's no checkoff point in the service order to confirm completion of an operation. Why? SAP was designed without inspection controls to prevent inspection steps from moving forward without proper sign-off. Why? The entry system for inspection operations is text-based rather than database oriented. Why? The SAP module that this was purchased was designed for supermarkets, not aerospace. Why? The QA inspectors do not confirm the completion of steps for the operations. Now that sounds logical. On the surface, that seems very logical. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is, in your 5 why diagrams, do a loop back. So in other words, you go downward and you ask the whys and you answer the whys, but then see if it makes sense to you when you do it in reverse. In other words, if I say there is no checkoff point in a service order to confirm completion of an operation, therefore SAP inspection steps move forward even though they are not signed off. So you need to check the logic of the loop back to the item above it. So here are some that don't work. They're not logical. If I say the entry system for inspection operations is text-based rather than database-oriented, therefore SAP was designed without inspection controls, that's not logical. That doesn't make sense. It's not a logical therefore. Here's another one that's not logical. If I say the SAP module that was purchased is designed for supermarkets, therefore the entry system for inspection operations is text-based, again, that's an illogical therefore conclusion. And then finally, when I got down to what I thought initially was my root cause, the QA inspectors do not confirm the completion steps for the operations, therefore the SAP module that was purchased, again, there's no logic in that. So that 5 whys, which initially looked like it got us to the root cause, is completely broken and falls apart under scrutiny. Now what I'm showing you is the real 5 whys and the real root cause analysis. And it turns out that when we get down to the 5 whys in this one, it was the same problem, only we put in the logical, not only the logical whys cascading down, but the logical therefores stepping back up through the 5 whys. We have a root cause analysis that is radically different from the one we had previously, and that is that executive and corporate level leadership's primary focus is cost. So now we have what started out to be a process or a technology root cause isn't that at all. It's a corporate culture. It's a leadership root cause, and that would require a completely different solution approach. The other reason I wanted you to think about finding the source of a corrective action or the source of an improvement is you need to know where you're going to get the most return on your investment improvement. So again, you need to look at people, which is not just the workforce skill sets and knowledge and expertise, but also the way people interact with each other, the way they conduct meetings and things like that. What I contend and what I have observed over the past 16 years is that it's almost impossible to improve one of those 3 systems without having some form of ancillary or collateral change to the other 2 systems. So in these charts, and I'm not going to read these to you in detail, but these charts show you that in this example here, if I improve people, the second column says, here's what the possible performance improvement is from improving people. But also importantly, in the third column, what is the relationship to other ways to improve? So, for example, if I improve knowledge, skills, and expertise of workers, over in the processes, the defined processes should accommodate the user spectrum, the process user spectrum of novice performers and expert performers. And the technology may need to be improved to not dumb down a task if I have improved the workforce skill set. If I improve technology, then over in my processes, the define and perform processes need to accommodate the new technology or the changed technology. And if I improve processes, for the people, when processes are defined or re-engineered, workers need to be educated in the use of the new or changed processes, and the technology may have to incorporate the use of the technology. So my key message here is, when you make a change, don't just change your QMS. Look at the collateral changes that need to be made in terms of training people, or a change to the way they interact with one of your systems or one of your platforms, and then release that change holistically, systemically. Make sure that when you release a change to your QMS, that it's got all of the accompanying changes to the other systems in your organization, the social system and the technology system. Now let's talk about how to figure out how do you know when your organization improves something, when your organization makes a change to the QMS to solve a problem or to achieve a goal. How do you know if you're going to get a return in value from that improvement? Well, first of all, before I talk about this slide, in 2013, I wrote and published a book, and the book is titled Return on Process. And that's sort of a play on the business phrase, return on investment or return on assets. And the book's full title is Return on Process, Getting Real Performance Results from Process Improvement. Because what I have seen in a lot of organizations is they're very careful, the leadership and the management is very, very careful to measure return on improvement or return on investments and return on assets and return on effort. But oftentimes they forget that they're spending, tens of thousands or even millions of dollars improving their processes, but they're not bothering to go find out, did they get a business return on that investment in process improvement. So the basic formula for return on process is the value of the performance gain, which is the performance gain through the process improvement, minus the cost of improvement. And that's just an extrapolation from the same accounting formula for return on investment. Now, we have to define those two phrases in that formula. The value of performance gain is the value of future performance, which measured after the improvement has been made, minus the value of the current or baseline performance. And then the cost of the improvement is the cost of the improvement effort, plus the cost of technology investment, plus the cost of training, implementation, and institutionalization of the change. And the numbers are not that difficult to acquire in terms of effort and dollars to figure out what your ROP is. But this is something that all of us who are in the business of maintaining a QMS or improving a QMS or improving our processes, before we run off and do any type of improvement, we really should take the time to be able to build the business case for our bosses to say, hey boss, here's the value that you can expect to get in return for investing in this improvement. Now, let's talk about one of the other rules, the thinking about the process as a product. If I give you this little quiz, this little test here, I'm gonna ask you, and of course you can't respond because you're on mute, but when I hear people talking about their process or their QMS or their process system, they just keep thinking about it as a binder with a bunch of paper in it, or a pile of documents, or maybe an online, a set of online workflows or something like that. But to get them to shift that thought, to shift that thinking, I ask these questions. So here's the test. What am I? I am complex and I have many integrated subsystems and parts. I have hundreds of high-level requirements or user stories. I need to provably comply with international industry standards. I have dozens of interfaces. I need to be designed before built. I need to be built according to the design. I can and should be verified against requirements. I can and should be tested at the modular or unit level and system level. And I can and should be planned, managed, and managed using proven project management practices. If you were to answer those, you would say, I am a product. So, but I'm here to tell you that I have helped clients design and build QMSs and process systems that could be described using all 9 of these attributes. And so what I try to get them to think about is, okay, if you stop thinking about building, just writing documents and writing a QMS, if the answer is, or if these questions describe what we're talking about, then what we're really talking about when we talk about your QMS is it's a very complex product or system. So if that's how you now think about your QMS, why do we just go off and write things or just go off and change things? Why don't we treat it like a product, and why don't we design it as a product and build it as a product using all of the same processes that we use to build our other products that we're delivering to customers? So just like a product or a technology system, a modern process system can have hundreds of high-level requirements, including user requirements. You know, what does the process performer need to do? What are their scenarios and when they use the process? What are the functional requirements? What are the interface requirements? What are the compliance requirements, whether it's ISO 9001 or AS9100, or maybe perhaps a federal regulation such as FDA regulations or things like that, or cybersecurity requirements. And then what are the IllaTs? If I say I'm going to build a cell phone, I'm going to, in the design and development, among the requirements, I'm going to say it has to have these IllaTs. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to give you an example of process system IllaTs here in just a minute. So designing and developing a process system for its users means defining the requirements for the user stories that define user preferences for ingesting information and acting appropriately. All of us learn differently, and we ingest instruction differently. About half of the world's population ingest information that's presented graphically via icons or pictures, and the other half ingests information and understands information better when it's text-based narrative. And so when we build a process system like a QMS, we need to accommodate both of those subpopulations of our workforce. We also need to incorporate user learning modalities. So some of us learn better by reading, some of us learn better by watching, and some of us learn better by doing. So when we design our QMS, do we think about that? Do we incorporate those different learning modalities of the process performers into the QMS? And we need to incorporate the range of user and potential user knowledge, skill, and experience. For any given process or procedure, we will have in our organization a novice user who's new to the process, and we'll have an expert user. And we want the QMS to accommodate both ends of that spectrum. We want the QMS to give the novice user enough information to make him or her effective in performing the process. And we want to give the expert user, we don't want to annoy the expert user by giving them too much information or forcing them to read through too many pages of text. when they already have the expertise to perform that task or that step. And we need to define not only what users want in the process, but also not defining what they don't want. We don't want to clutter the QMS with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to slow them down and make them inefficient and ineffective in their work. The whole idea of a process is to make the people, help the people performing it be effective and efficient in performing their work. So when I help clients develop process systems such as QMSs, I make sure that those QMSs or the resulting product, the QMS, meets the IllaTs that are defined. And I have an example of that I'm going to show you. You can define the IllaTs. You should be seeing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 8 definitions for IllaTs for a QMS or a process system. So we can define these, and then later we can, via peer reviews or some other form of verification, we can verify that what we have built in our QMS meets these IllaTs, things such as adoptable, which is the extent to which a process is usable and useful in the context of the work environment in which it's deployed. Adaptable, the extent to which a process can be adapted or tailored for use in the work environment. Extensible, the extent to which the process can be extended to accommodate additional areas, lines of work, lines of business, or environments. Measurable, the extent to which the performance of the process can be measured consistently and accurately. And then, another example, and one you're all familiar with, is the process auditable, which is the extent to which the process can be objectively audited. Oops, sorry. Go back to my slides here. So that's what I mean when I talk about designing to meet the IllaTs of a process system such as a QMS, just as you would do for any product that your organization is developing. And then I want to talk about if we believe in proven project management practices, such as those that we learned from the PMBOK, or maybe those that we learned from IDLE, or those that we learned from the CMMI. If we believe in those, if we believe that they work to plan and manage a product or a system, why wouldn't they also work for planning and managing the design and development or the maintenance of a QMS or our process system? Remember, back up a few slides mentally, and remember, we've accepted now that the QMS is, that the process is a product. So if we accept that, then we should apply project management practices. So process development project management involves first, really truly internalizing and understanding that the paradigm that developing an enterprise process system should be treated as a project, just as we would do a complex system. Establishing and maintaining the process system requirements. We just talked about some of those, and again, there's way more than what I'm able to cover in this presentation in terms of process system requirements. And then manage the process development project using plans. So for developing a QMS, we would have a project management plan, we'd have a development environment plan, we would have a work breakdown structure and a schedule, a risk management plan, a data management plan, a stakeholder involvement plan, a quality assurance plan. All of those plans that you would use to manage a product development project can be applied to developing a process development project. We would regularly have project team meetings for status against plans or risk management or lessons learned. And by the way, you can apply agile development approaches to process development too. You can have a product backlog for developing your QMS. You can have sprints, and you can have retrospectives, and all of those agile techniques will work to develop the QMS. In fact, I recently encountered a company that is doing exactly that to make changes to their QMS. You can have peer reviews to verify the process designs and the builds against the requirements. You can periodically and on an event-driven basis have project reviews with the sponsor or the product owner. You can have phase gate reviews or milestone reviews, just as you would do to make sure that you, for example, you can have a preliminary design review. You can have a test readiness review. You can have an interface review for your QMS because you have requirements for it. And then you can collect, analyze, and report process performance measures and metrics. Apologize for the typo there on number 8. Now let's talk about the process development project team, because I know how this is normally done, and I'm encouraging you to change the way it's doing it. Normally, when you have you're going to develop a QMS, or maybe you have one already and you're going to make some major changes to it. Let's say a new revision to the standard comes out, and now you have to do a full system review of your QMS to see where to make the changes. A lot of times what people do is they just say to the quality manager, oh, you've got to go through and write all these changes, or you and the tech writer have to go write all these changes. But I contend, and I posit to you, that you really should think about, if you have a major effort, like a major upgrade to your QMS, think about establishing a project team. And that's more than just your best tech writer or your quality manager. So let's talk about some of the skill sets that you need on that team. You need domain knowledge and experience. In other words, you need someone on the team who can represent the users or the performers of the QMS. A lot of times a QMS group is just the quality department, and they don't always have that domain experience to bring to the team, to bring to the changes to the QMS. If your QMS, as most of yours are, if they need to enable compliance with a standard like ISO 9001 or something like that, then obviously you need someone with knowledge and expertise. Perhaps if you have an internal auditor that you can get on the process development team, that would be useful. And then have someone who has information mapping or process modeling knowledge. We're not all born. You're not just born a process designer, or you don't just wake up one day and you're a process designer. This is an acquired skill and an acquired experience set, and it goes way beyond writing. And then someone with process definition and tools expertise, and this goes beyond just the MS Office products, because if you say, well, yeah, we know somebody who knows Word and Excel really, really well, then you're already assuming that, let's say you're building a new QMS. If you assume that that's the only skill set you need, then you're already assuming that the representation of the process is text-based narrative, and right off the bat, you've eliminated 50% of the world's population in terms of how people prefer to ingest and use information. 50% that prefer a graphical representation. And then consider having a project manager, or if you're an agile environment, a scrum master or a sprint lead, to make sure that the pace and the cadence of the QMS change or development is happening according to the estimates and the schedules. And then, because change always requires someone always requires at some point a promotion or a sale or a communication about it and the value of that change, the value of that upgrade to the QMS. Get somebody on the team who has those skills, who's very, very good at talking to people and selling them on the change. Now, I've got a couple of slides here that are that basically take the typical product development roles, and I extrapolate them and I transform them into process development project team roles, such as process project manager or sprint or scrum lead, requirements analyst, a process designer, a process developer. And again, I want to go back to, I'll just focus on process designer. That is not just your best tech writer. That's not just a quality manager or his or her designee. That's somebody with that very special skill set that we just talked about in terms of process, information mapping and process modeling. You might have a configuration or data manager to, just as you would on a product development project, somebody who can, establish and maintain the integrity of the work products and the bits and pieces that make up the QMS. Someone who can test it, someone who can verify that the QMS is meeting the requirements that you defined or the user stories that you defined. And then someone who's looking at the quality of the builds or the changes to the QMS or the end resulting QMS. And then you would want a sponsor, somebody who's going to make sure that your QMS upgrade or your revision or your new QMS, that project is getting the funding and the resources and the priority in the organization that it deserves in order to meet the requirements and meet the expectations of that QMS. And then this slide is basically, if you think about an integrated project team, so where you have a very, very complex product or system that you're developing, such as a process system or a QMS, you might have the development team. And what this chart describes is the very, very highest level responsibilities for this integrated team. So you'd have a development team that defines the process requirements and the architecture, a change control board, which would review and approve changes to the QMS and the process assets in the QMS, a review test team, a release implementation team, and then you release that process, your QMS, to the customers. Remember, most of the time, the quality department, with the exception of some aspects of the QMS, you're not the customer, you're not the user. It's your engineers, it's the people on the production floor, it's the purchasing, procurement, it's the planners, it's the all the people who are using the QMS. They are the customer, and you're delivering a product to them that they need to use to do their job. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Hannah, and she's got some information she'd like to tell you about, and then I believe we'll get into questions and answers.
Thank you, Michael, for this great presentation. So before we proceed with the Q&A session, I would like to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 9001 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, Lead Auditor, and also the Transition course. ISO 9001 helps you in ensuring that customers get consistent and good quality products, which in turn bring many business benefits. For more information, please visit our website, www.pcb.com/training. Now, I would like to proceed by answering some of the questions asked by the audience. So the first question is regarding the 5 whys. The question is, how do you know when to stop asking why?
All right, that is an excellent question. I appreciate that. I usually advise people to stop asking why just before they really annoy their boss and get in trouble with their boss. You don't always know. What I recommend is that you ask why until you get down to a cause that you and the other people who are going to work on the problem can reasonably address. So if I get down, so an example, I'm going to go back to that slide here. Let me just go back to that one. Okay, so in this 5 why, I got down to the executive and corporate level leadership's primary focus is cost. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, or I'm not saying that's good, and I'm not even saying that me and the other people who are on this this Kaizen or this problem, working this problem, all we can do at this point is take this back up the chain, back up to management, and say, we got down to the root cause. This is the logical root cause. This is the correct root cause, and we're not saying that this isn't something you must change or want to change. This is really a corporate culture, and we, the Kaizen team or the problem-solving team, we cannot affect this root cause very much. So if you, Mr. Leader, Mr. Manager, if you want this to change, we're going to have to transfer this one to you to affect a change. But oftentimes you will get down to the root cause is a let me just make up a realistic example. The root cause is that the fields in a data entry screen of a database don't force entry. They don't force someone to enter. In other words, I'm entering something and I can skip fields. And it turns out that skipping fields means that we don't get the information and the metrics and the trends that we need to understand some performance or some dimension in the organization. So what I would do then with that root cause is I would meet with the IT department or the system administrator and say, hey, how can we change our data entry screen to require and validate information that people are putting in these fields? But there's not a magical answer to how many whys do you go down. I just say, don't ask so many that your boss gets mad at you and fires you.
Thank you,
Next
Michael.
question.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Another question that we have is how to ensure that your QMS is compliant with CMMI, or Capability Maturity Model Integration.
So what I do is, as part of the requirements, and let me find that slide real quick. So remember, one of the subsets of requirements for my QMS is compliance requirements. So now I don't really like to talk about the CMMI in terms of compliance, because it's a model. It's a model for engineering excellence and for process improvement. And the word compliance doesn't really fit the CMMI like it does an ISO standard. But let's just pretend that you want your QMS to enable behaviors that align with the practices in the CMMI. So then what I would do is I would include all of the practices in the CMMI, and I would have established traceability between those practices and something, some compelling statement or some instruction in my QMS. So if I had for example, if I had a practice in the CMMI, I'll just pick one, project planning SP 1.2, which is estimate the attributes of the work and work products that you're going to build. So if I look at that practice, then what I need is I need some prescriptive, not descriptive, but prescriptive component, a procedure or some other architectural element in my QMS that I have attributed as prescriptive, which means it must be performed, that requires people to estimate the attributes of the work and the work products when they're developing the product. And so you could, just as you have requirements traceability for your products, you can have requirements traceability between your requirements for your QMS and the resulting QMS.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Another question that we have asked by the audience is, what should be the outcome of RCA? Is it a process, person, or is it something else, and why?
So it depends on what, so it could be multiple. You could have a multi-branch RCA that 5 whys where you end up with 2 or even 3 root causes. And without looking at the specific situation the person is talking about, you might end up with one of the root causes being a process problem. Another branch in that same 5 whys might yield a technology problem, and a third branch might yield a workforce skill problem. And so now you've got 3 root causes that you need to work concurrently or parallel to improve, to systemically keep that problem or problem from manifesting itself again. And I've had those situations where there's right off the problem statement, there's 2 or 3 branches that each then go down their own 5 whys path. So there's not a canned answer for the person asking. I appreciate the question very much, but it really depends on how many branches you have coming off that problem statement.
Thank you, Michael. Another question that we have is, can CMMI be used also for small companies, or is it only used for large ones?
Oh, I have good news for you. That's a great question. Right now, I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I just graduated the very first class of lead appraisers who are going to be certified for the new version of the CMMI V2.0, which will be released by the Institute in the first quarter of next year. So let me tell you why I'm bringing that up. There is and always has been a perception that the CMMI is just too big and too much overhead for small organizations and small companies. And I have to admit that there's a lot of validity in that perception. The CMMI version 1.3 is massive. I think it's 670 pages or something like that. Good news. Version 2.0 of the CMMI reduces the volume of the content of the model by 68%. And it is lighter, it is leaner, it's very flexible in how you adopt it and use it in your organization. It's very flexible in how you conduct appraisals against it. So hang in there, whoever asked, hang in there, and please, toward the end of the first quarter of next year, check out version 2.0 of the model, or work through your CMMI partner. If you don't have a CMMI partner, my company is a CMMI partner, and we can certainly help you understand how the value proposition for adopting the model.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Because of time limitation, we will only be answering one more question, while the rest of the questions will be answered by Michael via email. So the last question for today is, based on your experience, what are some key advantages of implementing CMMI in the organization?
And I'm going to go straight to the contact information real quick here, Hannah. Sorry, I didn't do that.
Sure, no problem.
I'm gonna display my contact information here, so you can write that down. So the benefit of using the CMMI, first of all, let me say, I've worked with a lot of organizations that need to address ISO 9000 or AS9100 requirements, and they also need to maintain a CMMI maturity level. And what I've taught them how to do is to achieve both of those goals with one effort and one QMS or one process system, and not have, you know, the quality group going off and doing the QMS and the CMMI group going off and doing another set of processes. One set of processes that address both end to end. But the business benefit, and when you see version 2.0 next year, every practice area has a value statement right at the top of it. And the value statement very explicitly says, here is the performance improvement that you can expect to gain from implementing the practices in this practice area. That's a huge change to the model, and that's really all I can tell you right now is read that value statement and read and understand how that will add value in the work that your organization does.
Okay, so thank you once again for this presentation, Michael. It was a pleasure having you as a presenter. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us today. Please be reminded that this webinar will be recorded and posted in our YouTube channel and also in our SlideShare account. Also, for the attendees who could not join us from the beginning of this webinar, I wanted to let them know that PCB is organizing the Anti-Bribery PCB Insights Conference, which will take place in Montreal, Canada on November 13th and 14th. All the interested participants can get a free ticket if they register until October 31st. So once again, I thank you and wish you a wonderful rest of the day.